I am so pleased to have with me someone who has very generously interviewed me on a number of occasions, actually, and who Julian Assange actually shared my last interview with. And that is the wonderful author, journalist, columnist, H.A. Goodman. Hi, H.A. Welcome to the stream.
Suzie, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm hanging in there for Julian. We are, God knows how many hours are we through now? I think about 16 or something. We must be
Wow.
nearly hitting the halfway point, but we have 38 hours on this vigil. And you were with us on the very first one, which was a 10-hour emergency vigil that we did when we first heard the news that Julian had been disconnected.
This is my third one, actually.
It was amazing. We've gone
And
from
I'm
10
honored
hours.
and privileged every time.
We've gone from 10 hours to 26 hours to now 38 hours. And I think sky is the limit. I've got people constantly emailing me, asking me to join. So this is really starting to turn into something truly phenomenal.
Well, like you said, I think that whenever anyone tries to silence a voice, that voice grows stronger. And now we have so many people who want Julian Assange free. And I was just actually, I don't know if you're familiar with this speech from Trump. This is non-political, non-partisan, but it was at a charity event and the Al Smith dinner. And this was like an event in New York right before the election. And I've for my channel, I listen to it, and it's hilarious because he goes for the jugular against Clinton. That's hilarious. But he brings up WikiLeaks, and he brings up WikiLeaks. Like he basically made a joke like, oh, I don't know if, can you hear me okay?
Sorry, I can hear you just fine. Sorry, I've got a tendency to mute my mic when you're speaking.
Okay.
So that there's no
is this mic on?
No, you're good. You're good. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm listening.
So he brings up WikiLeaks, and you can tell that, and I know that, Jeff Sessions and, Pompeo, and I know that they have stated categorically and overtly that they want to, arrest Julian, but you can tell from that speech, it's the Al Smith dinner. It's like about 2 weeks before the election, and everyone there just pretty much runs New York. I mean, you have everybody from Bloomberg to Clinton, everybody, and he is just going for the jugular. And the jokes are like, really, it's not really jokes. It wasn't really roasting. It was just Trump going after Clinton, talking about emails, all these things. But then he talks about how did she get the invitation? If it's through email, you probably heard of it through the wonders of WikiLeaks. And he talks about WikiLeaks. And I think he says even, I love WikiLeaks. So it was just something I wanted to bring up because I was just watching it for one of my uploads.
Well, HA, there's something that I've been absolutely dying to talk to you about because it is so close to your area of expertise and your personal interest. And that is the revelation in the Hill about the immunity deal with Assange that was killed by Representative Mark Warner and by none
James
other Comey. So let rip. What's your vantage point?
Just when you thought Comey couldn't be more inept, just when you thought he couldn't be more vile, it's like, surely he can't be that evil. And then when I looked at that, I was like, oh my God. And he didn't even give like a reason. I think it was Bruce Orr, one of the DOJ officials who was involved in giving Comey the Steele dossier. Even he was like, yeah, let's help Julian Assange. Let's go. I mean, I don't know if he said, let's help Julian Assange, but he was like he was an intermediary to go ahead. And that's what the intelligence community needs in the United States. Like, we need to know if indeed they're doing things right, or how they can not be so corrupt, or now how they can not get hacked, or whatever, like what they can do to ensure that people within their organizations don't say, hey, there's so much corruption here, we're going to leak this information because we're whistleblowers. Basically, I've always stated that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange are an asset, a positive, could be a positive force to protecting the United States of America. And that could be a very big reason why either Trump pardons Julian Assange, or I hope that he eventually does, or Julian Assange doesn't even need to be pardoned. He didn't do anything wrong. There's no crimes he's committed. He's a publisher. But the point is, James Comey said, oh, well, no, let's not do this. Let's not allow Julian Assange to be to have an immunity deal, when he's given immunity deals to people like Brian Pagliano, who rewired existing networks to allow special access program intelligence outside the country, outside the United States of America, onto Clinton's private server in her basement. That's SAP intelligence, the highest form of classified intelligence, beyond top secret. And he was okay with that. He gave Brian Pagliano an immunity deal. Eventually, did he? Yeah. Eventually Pagliano got immunity eventually. And everyone, all the culprits in that got immunity. And that actually did hurt the country, because Defense Secretary Robert Gates said it's almost certain that Russia, China, and Iran hacked Clinton's server. And they actually did hurt the country. And the intelligence community in the United States has between the CIA, FBI, and NSA, they have a $35 billion budget. And they haven't reached out to Julian Assange. They haven't reached out to WikiLeaks. They haven't looked at the DNC servers. They haven't done anything. Yet they say they're moderately confident. The intelligence reports are hilarious. They have warranty disclaimers. High confidence. They even say high confidence could be wrong. They could be wrong in their assessment. And meanwhile, Julian Assange publishes the actual truth, which is why I know Trump's administration is not kind to WikiLeaks or Julian, but I'd be willing to bet that Donald Trump, just the human being, likes WikiLeaks, thinks Assange is doing the right thing, and doesn't, but he's president, so he's playing ball, unfortunately, with people who have these entrenched interests within the intelligence, whatever, this is a stupid phrase, intelligence community. It's just a bunch, it's bureaucrats that are vying for billions and billions of dollars in terms of a budget. But yeah, so they were very close, actually very, very close. I think John Solomon broke that story at the Hill, and Comey, in yet another, the imbecile named Comey, in yet another horrible example of his, deceit and his inability to just do anything right, said, oh, well, no, we can't go ahead and do that, because if they do that, then all the lies. I mean, from Comey's perspective, he has to fabricate the Trump-Russia myth. He has to go ahead and keep up all his lies. So he was very likely thinking of his own behind in not allowing Julian Assange to have an immunity.
So do you think it was a unilateral action by him then? Or, what was behind Comey? Who was behind Comey, putting the kibosh on this?
Well, let's look at all these wonderful people who are just so intelligent and awesome. Raw Story wrote a ridiculous, dumb hit piece on me. Anyway, one of the reasons they said, well, he's promoting the uranium conspiracy. I quote from the New York Times: cash flow to Clinton Foundation amid Russian uranium deal. That's cash. That's pretty easy to understand. And guess who was FBI director then? Robert Mueller. And in the bottom of that article, it says yellow cake uranium was shipped out of the country using the export licenses of trucking companies. So Rosatom and Uranium One didn't have export licenses. So the Democrats were jumping up for joy. Yay, this is fantastic. Well, they didn't realize that there was an ongoing bribery and racketeering scandal, and the trucking companies just used their export licenses, and they shipped out uranium to Canada. While Mueller was FBI chief, then after Mueller, and now Mueller is the wonderful, paragon of virtue, and he's now special counsel Mueller, investigating Russian meddling as he allowed yellow cake to be shipped from the U.S. to Russia. Yellow cake uranium, which if processed differently could become a nuclear weapon. But let's not even go too much into that. That's Robert Mueller before Comey. Then Comey is there, and he's a 6'8" Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And I mean, everything from Trump, Russia to the Clinton email investigation was she committed crimes. So they're like, oh my God, how do we do this? Then there's Peter Strzok with the text messages, that the real time, like, we hate Trump, we're going to stop Trump, insurance policy. But see, the thing is, it's not just about Trump. Let's say you could be watching this and you hate Trump. It actually hurts really everyone, because what we had a history of a peaceful transition of power in this country. So what took place was they were spying on Trump with GCHQ since 2015. So they found nothing, absolutely nothing. And then they're like, oh God, we found nothing. So then Elizabeth Voss at Disobedient Media has she's, as you know, an amazing journalist. And so she exposed Joseph Mifsud, the professor, who's now AWOL or like missing. Is he still missing? I don't know. But he has ties to British intelligence. He was speaking apparently to Papadopoulos. So it's this whole like gossip and hearsay, and they purchased the Steele dossier from an MI6 guy. So I mean, really what's behind Comey is that Comey is just holding up the fort and
for the entire global intelligence network.
Yeah. So I mean, all of these people, like, they spent $35 billion and they had to go to British intelligence because they apparently didn't spend enough money to have enough intelligence to find any evidence. So I think it's just, this giant web of deceit that hopefully is going to come crashing down very soon.
The key messages that I've taken away so far from the interviews that I've done on this stream have been Dan Ellsberg saying that he believes that this persecution of Assange is intended to set a precedent, that they fully intend to get their hands on him, extradite him, prosecute him, jail him, and to create a legal precedent under which they can then systematically go after other journalists and publishing organizations across the world. My takeaway from my conversation with Cassandra's conversation with Kim that I was watching. Kim, if you really must see his segment tonight. I've never seen him like he was tonight. He absolutely let rip on Trump for serving deep state interests by preparing to hand Assange over on a platter to the same people who've been persecuting Trump. Also, my conversation with Dmitry Babich, where he talked about the Mindszenty case, which was where the shoe was on the other foot. There was a cardinal that was in an American embassy, had been granted asylum, and who the Soviet regime would not allow to have access to the airport to go and to realize his asylum in America. I was wondering what your input is on those counts.
Well, if God forbid that happens, if God forbid Julian Assange is extradited to the U.S. or arrested and extradited to the United States, I will withdraw my support of President Trump. And it won't just be me. So that would be politically devastating for Trump. That would be very, very stupid for Trump to do. One reason he won is because of the independent vote. And another reason, one reason he won is because people voted for him because, he was viewed as less a part of the system, that he was shaking up the system, which in many ways he has. But if he were to then kowtow, because the drive, like, for example, when Pence went to Ecuador, they were Democratic senators like, you have to make Assange's life miserable. It was the push and the fuel is from Democrats to hurt Julian Assange. Whether Trump is kowtowing, yeah, obviously his administration is saying, things that are echoing or bolstering what, whatever, the CIA and FBI and NSA have said in the past. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I hope I'm right. I hope I'm right, actually. What am I saying? I hope I'm right. I cannot foresee Julian Assange extradited to the U.S. under Trump, because it would be politically too damaging to Trump. Not only, I mean, who am I? I'm just one person. Like, I don't, just one person. But there's a lot of people like me. There's a hashtag walk away movement. There's a lot of people who are moving from the left towards, I wouldn't say I'm right at all, but like towards conservatives or towards, and one reason is that WikiLeaks has published the truth, and nobody should be punished for the truth. You even teach children to tell the truth, and no one should be punished for the truth. And one thing Trump does is that and I understand that Pompeo as a CIA director and Sessions have made those comments, so it's a priority. But I think there's also a level of trying to curry favor or trying to ingratiate themselves with a whole bunch of people who want them done in also. So I don't know. I don't think right now at this point, I don't think the House or the Senate is going to go. I think that Republicans will sweep both the House and Senate. I think that once that takes place, a whole lot of things will happen as a repercussion. I'm hoping they won't be as belligerent in terms of what they're trying to do against Julian Assange. I'm hoping, like I said, if God forbid, if God forbid that happened to Julian Assange, I would that day not like withdraw my support, and it wouldn't just be me. Like, Trump's not stupid. He's not stupid. He knows that he actually could lose 2020 if that happens. And
I agree with you. I agree with you for two reasons. One is WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, but the other reason I think he's at risk in 2020 is because he ran an anti-war platform, and all of this regime change in Iran nonsense is not anti-war. I mean, the people, I just had someone saying to me before on Twitter, but who wouldn't want to depose the mullahs? Well, why are the mullahs there? The mullahs are there from the last time that you're meddling in Iran. So what are we going to have if you do it again? Or like ISIS 2.0?
Yeah, I don't think like the whole when you have was it Bolton? He's like more of like I call him, he looks like a crazy homeless guy. Like John Bolton.
And he's a Clintonite. Yeah. I mean, the thing that freaks me out about Bolton is if Hillary had won, I think Bolton would still have the same job.
Well, somebody like him who's better dressed and less disheveled. Yeah. But the thing with, we'll never, I don't think we would ever invade Iran. I don't think we would ever do anything like that or attack Iran. In terms of trying to foment unrest, I think that, that would be horrendous, because you're talking about so many lives lost. And not just, it would be a repeat of 1979. And I actually have a friend at a Persian restaurant in LA, and he was talking about, like, he's one of the managers of the restaurant. He was actually arrested and sent to there was an arrest warrant out for him. And people he knew, like family, people he knew, were arrested and sent to prison, tortured. But there was an arrest warrant out for him in the revolution in Iran in 1979. And he then had this, like, an amazing story. He then had to get dressed up as like a religious, like a mullah guy, and go to the front lines. And he did that to escape from Tehran, the front lines afterwards when there was a war with Iraq. And he actually set up a hospital taking care of wounded soldiers, but also wounded religious soldiers, because they were actually being not taken care of, because the Red Cross, people there would not take care of them for some reason. And so he set up this hospital, this field hospital with nurses and doctors and everything. And then he went back to Tehran, and he almost got caught again. But then one of the mullah or the religious leaders said, "Hey, I know that guy from the war. No, he's fine." Even though there was an arrest warrant out for him, and he left. and he was able to flee to, I think, like either Germany or. But that's an amazing story. I mean, like that's like, what would I mean? You know, you don't want to revolutions are not. So many people perish and are slaughtered, and no, I don't want that. And I think that as long as Trump doesn't destroy Libya like Obama with NATO, I think that right now he'll get reelected in 2020. It's not even a doubt in my mind. The only thing that could really hurt him, even far more than the rhetoric from Bolton or whatever. I mean, you know, they're always going to say, yeah, you know, you should really go ahead and overthrow that horrible regime in Iran. They're going to say that stuff. And I mean, they're going to say like, yeah, this intelligence community, well, you know, they found out that WikiLeaks, you know, was part of something really bad. I mean, they're going to like, you know, because what are they going to say? Like, he can't, he's almost this close to telling the FBI to F themselves. He's this close, Trump is, but he can't go all the way. I think that if we see, like, God forbid, they use that stupid term like the optics. But if we, God forbid, saw Julian Assange extradited to the United States of America, it would be a global phenomenon it would not only expedite #walkaway, it would expedite #walkaway from Republicans and Trump also. It would just be like walk away from all politics. There'd be like 2 people voting for the 2020 election.
Which,
so
funnily enough, that's where we were at in 2011. Is the system is broken, the Democrats are corrupt, the Republicans are corrupt, the two-party system is a sham, the one vote every 4 years for one of 2 puppet candidates is a sham. The system is not serving anybody. Occupy. I mean, it seems revolutionary that we're having this unity event and combining people from across the political spectrum, but really, Occupy was a melting pot. I mean, we had Tea Party Republicans at Occupy. We had full-on hard left Antifa, environmentalists, socialists. We had libertarians. We really did have full spectrum at Occupy. And it seems like, in some ways, the Trump campaign reminds me a bit of the 2008 Obama campaign. It was the hope and change that you can believe in, you know. And just like Obama pushed, you know, anti-war, pulling troops out of Iraq, pulling troops out of Afghanistan, closing Guantanamo Bay, and then did the total opposite of that. We have Trump saying no more regime change, no more interfering in the Middle East, got to look after America. And like, where are we sitting, you know, right now? Right now, we've got Rudy Giuliani talking to 100,000 people in Europe saying we're going to install the MEK in Iran. And what does the letter M stand for? Mujahideen. So
yeah,
we've gone from no more regime change to let's install a Mujahideen regime.
Yeah.
In a year and a half.
I gotta tell you, I mean, if I let's put it this way, the 2 things, like I've always stated, if there was an actual push for regime change where we send soldiers and we topple a dictator, I mean, the whole let's assist the destruction of a regime that we don't like. Yeah, I'm against that too, but unfortunately, that's not going to change either party. Like you said, like both parties are. I voted for Jill Stein, so I never thought that. I don't think Trump is like, you know, a hippie, but like I think that my whole thing is that he was less hawkish than Democrats, which are overtly, like, you have a Max Boot and Bill Kristol, who are now like, vote Democrat. So in that sense, but I do agree with you. I don't think we should foment any unrest in Iran. I think that's bad. But I do think that right now, unless there's 2 things that take place, like if one of these 2 things takes place, I don't see Trump winning. Or I see Trump having a real tough time. One is if we engage in something like Libya, where it's like, you know, we topple somebody and the country just, there's slave auctions. And then 2, if, God forbid, Julian Assange is extradited or arrested and sent to the U.S., I think that it would be a catastrophe politically for Trump, a catastrophe. I think that it would backfire, and he knows that too. I don't think President Trump is oblivious to what would take place in terms of the world consciousness and also in terms of his base of supporters. Not just because of the WikiLeaks and Podesta emails, which obviously exposed Democratic corruption, not just because of that, not just because if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter like I was, that we found out that, they actually wrote in their own words that they were cheating Bernie. And we found that out because of WikiLeaks publishing the information. But I think there's a certain level of, I guess, pride, or a certain level of okay, well, there are Trump voters, or there are people who vote for Trump, or people who would never think of voting for Trump who eventually did, as a protest to the Democratic Party, as a protest. So there's a lot of people who voted for Trump who didn't like him, but they said, I want to go ahead and, hurt the Democratic Party, so I'll just vote for Trump. If he does the bidding of Hillary Clinton, then I don't think that's you can't lock her up and then extradite Julian Assange. It doesn't work that way. So I hope I'm right. I can't imagine it under President Trump's administration. But I mean, like I said, God forbid if it takes place, it would be a much bigger thing than just, little old me saying, I'm not going to vote Trump. It would be millions of people throughout the world and hundreds of thousands of American voters saying, whoa, this is not right. This is wrong. And I think that Trump knows that. So.
Okay, politics aside, and I did really enjoy, actually, especially about the Comey part, the discussion that we just had. But politics aside for a minute, I'd like you to put your journalist hat on. You're someone who actively dissents on, actually, I want to say a mass media platform. You're not in the sense of the mainstream media, but in the sense that, people like yourself and right up to Jimmy Dore are now commanding audience sizes that are bigger than CNN gets when they post a video to their crappy YouTube channel.
half the YouTube viewers, they're like it's called correct the record. It's like half correct the record. The stupidest comments. They're like when there's a picture of Mueller on CNN, they're like, "Me lovey Mueller. Oh, Avenatti is so sexy." They're like, "Oh, Stormy Daniels' his lawyer sexy." Go on. I'm sorry.
As a journalist, I'd like to know. You dissent against Clinton. You rail against Clinton. You rail against Trump when he does something out of order, or when he's violating, his supposed principles and his base and his platform. That's a luxury that you currently enjoy that we can't say you might have in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time, if Julian and WikiLeaks do become a precedent for the takedown of dissenting journalists and media organizations. So I wanted to just know two things. One, as a journalist, how do you feel about what's being done to Julian and to WikiLeaks? And two, where do you see it going, and where would you like to see it going, which I assume are probably two different things?
Well, to answer the second question, I want to see him free with his family, and he deserves freedom. This is like a global. This will be discussed. Julian Assange will be, the kids will learn about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks hundreds of years from now. Like a lot of the things we talk about will be footnotes in history. I do believe that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange will be discussed hundreds of years from now, and kids will learn about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So that's and he deserves freedom as a human being and a journalist, but first and foremost as a human being. This is a sadistic, hate-filled onslaught or attack against Julian Assange because one side, both sides, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and whether it's these unelected officials or these agencies that have billions and billions of dollars in funding, if there's more truth, when the truth about what goes on about wars or political campaigns, you're more educated, you're more aware as a society, you're less susceptible to being deceived or duped. And so obviously they see Julian Assange as an enormous threat, and an enormous threat because they're not going to get $35 billion combined. The CIA and NSA, the FBI has spent us $70,000 on a desk, $70,000 on a conference table. So I mean, it's like a giant money laundering. Like the political parties and government, huge money laundering scheme. Also, so they view Julian Assange also as a threat economically to them, a threat in terms of them not getting away with things. And they always paint it as, oh, well, this hurts national security. Nobody has hurt national security more than Clinton with her server. But anyway, I think that it is a really evil thing that they're doing to him. And I think I see him eventually winning. I think that there's too much political momentum on his side, because even people like who want him, like the most vicious people online. And by the way, like there's so bizarre. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but like, who these people are, like these so bizarre, like journalists who should be defending Julian Assange, who have so vicious and so like filled with hate. They like want to see him suffer. And even they know that he did nothing wrong. The really disgusting thing is that the people who should know, the people who should be defending him under the guise of attacking Trump, so they go against him, they know that he didn't do anything wrong. They just think that like it's not fair. Like it's not fair that we learn so much about one side but not about the other. But that has nothing to do with the messenger. That has nothing to do with the publisher. So all of this is like this giant temper tantrum / like they feel better about themselves if they could go ahead and attack Julian Assange, and they want to hurt him because they're morally corrupt. So in terms, I mean, from a journalistic standpoint, they know Assange did nothing wrong. That's what is so evil about all of this. They just want to hurt him for doing nothing wrong because they lost. They're a bunch of losers. So really, they're a bunch of evil, sad, pathetic losers.
In the meantime, then we have the mainstream media who's done literally nothing but defame and smear him for 8 years. What's your take on that? I mean, John Pilger said at the Sydney rally on June 19th that the media hate Julian because his existence is an everyday reminder that they are not doing their jobs.
Well, yes, that's true, but there's also something that I think that smart people understand in the media, but also in government, and even also in the intelligence community. The smart people, that it's a toss-up as to whether there are that many smart people, but they do understand that, God forbid, if something were to happen to Julian Assange, it would be a worldwide phenomenon of people who would then question the world even more. The thing with Julian Assange is that when you try to, there's like a rap phrase, like if you diss me, you diss yourself. So if they try to hurt him, they're actually hurting themselves. And the more that they try to, they actually don't know what they're doing, because they're undermining their own political future by trying to hurt a publisher and a journalist who actually publishes pristine documents. So there's nothing. What they want to do is the people who do want to spread to make an example will have the opposite effect of what they want. It will not deter. And one thing I always say about WikiLeaks too, and I don't think anybody's really saying this, WikiLeaks is a noble organization. If you had an organization with people that trusted it, that it was not noble, that wanted to hurt, that would be dangerous. That's what the CIA and the NSA and the FBI should realize, that like they have somebody who they could like work with in terms of working, meaning like let them know, what's wrong with them. Like why are there people leaking information? Why are they so corrupt that they can't trust people within their own agencies? Or whatever it is, like during the immunity deal, there was interest. And there was interest there because Julian Assange can benefit the United States, could make us safer. We have a war on terror because it's also an information war. And there are many things we don't know about how information can keep us safe. We're clueless and we're focused on the most ridiculous, dumb things. And Julian Assange could actually help make the country safer, help save lives. And so they should work with him. But I mean, everything they want to accomplish, just like everything they touch just turns to the most horrible thing. If they tried to make an example out of Julian Assange, the opposite would take place. All their political objectives, the opposite would take place. And that goes for Trump too. It's not just, if it wouldn't just hurt Democrats, it would hurt Trump, and it would be really, really bad for the country. And then there would be people in other countries like the UK and Australia and New Zealand who would also say, wait, what's going on? This is also an indictment of my country as well. So,
one thing that I think is really beautiful, this extends to all of the whistleblowers and truth tellers who have public visibility, as well as particularly to Julian, is I feel like when I was growing up, who did we have as idols? Who did we have to look up to? Kurt Cobain, Nirvana. I'm a child of the 80s, the 90s. What was there really in the 90s? There was no truth teller. There was no whistleblower. There was no one putting their life on the line for humanity. There was no one making great sacrifice for the public good. There was no one utilizing their time in meaningful ways rather than hedonistic ways. We grew up with very hedonistic role models, and I feel like Julian has ushered in this new era where maybe young people have someone to look up to and someone to aspire to be like, someone who is cool and edgy and technologically savvy, but someone that they really can aspire to be more like in a way that's positive for humanity. Do you get where I'm going with that?
Absolutely. Also, how many times do you really see someone who is so principled? I'm sure that if he disclosed sources, he could be out in a second. I think that if he disclosed sources, but that's like a principle of WikiLeaks, a bedrock principle. He would rather not ever, tarnish the foundation of what he's created. And he will, continue to actually endure all this onslaught and this, unfair treatment and this horrible treatment. But it's a testament to, because if you see people in organizations, whether it's the FBI or the mafia or anyone, they're turning on each other left and right, and they're doing anything possible to attain freedom or their personal gain. The backstabbing, people backstab each other all the time in offices, but he will not ever disclose a source. I think also and from a moral vantage point, from a very, very moral vantage point, without getting into, craziness, I think he did everything that he could do from a moral vantage point regarding that issue. But, I look at it as it's really good versus evil. And if this is a movie, it's so easy to see who the villains are. The villains are anyone who is not defending and who is attacking Julian Assange, especially the people. I know you brought up mainstream, Suzie, but the mainstream's always, dorky, and, they're just fumbling around, and whatever they think is going to be good for the producers say, okay, well, we'll go ahead and look at this. And everything is from an establishment point of view. But I'm talking when you look at, obviously I'm not going to bring up names, but there are journalists and people who should be defending Julian Assange who aren't. That's what really bothers me. There are people who pretend to uphold this lofty image, but then there's a lot of people who also have done great things, but they're not defending Julian Assange. And I think that again, if God forbid he's ever extradited, I think that even those people I mean, the opposite would take place. If he was ever extradited to the U.S., it would be the political downfall for Trump, but also for Democrats and Trump and Republicans. I mean, it would just be horrendous. So I'm hoping, I don't foresee it ever taking place, but maybe I'm too optimistic.
You know, we like to ask people, what was the WikiLeaks release that meant the most for them, that was the most impactful for them? I don't think I even need to ask you this.
Well, I mean, just in terms of, look, I mean, the DNC leaks are not, they're like, a whole bunch of other, like the Iraq war logs and the Afghan. I mean, in terms of, grandiose information, there's been, publications from WikiLeaks that actually, talking about world history. The DNC, though, was one of the, I loved WikiLeaks even before the DNC and Podesta leaks, because I just thought that they were awesome. Because I've written against counterinsurgency wars in The Hill and other publications. I was a contributor to The Hill. And I've written, I very much against counterinsurgency wars. Half to 2/3 of all the Americans killed and wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan were the victims of IED blasts. And so establishment Republicans and Democrats don't care. I hate that. So when they published information that exposed the reality of war, that's, Americans should know that. So in terms of like what people found out from WikiLeaks, the knowledge, obviously the knowledge from prior publications, a lot more relevant or important to people's lives than the DNC. But the DNC, the publications of the DNC emails showed me, not just that Bernie Sanders was cheated, but, that, they didn't accept truth. And that's just with all the WikiLeaks publications. People don't want, they think that the interesting thing about WikiLeaks is that WikiLeaks is actually telling people, here's the corruption. What are you going to do with it? And they're like, oh, it's normal. Oh, it's fine. If it's my side, I don't care. If it's the other side, yes, but if it's just the country, because Bush and Obama did, and now in Yemen, there's Trump, but the country runs along and engages in these wars, and it exposes the government. And I think Daniel Ellsberg said this about the Pentagon Papers. He expected a bigger reaction initially. And there was people are like, this is horrible, but they don't react in the way that they should. Like, oh my God. So I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I think that, the DNC, obviously, because I was such a, passionate Bernie Sanders supporter, the DNC and Podesta emails were very, very influential to me. So
I think, and to millions and millions and millions of people who perhaps had not been aware of WikiLeaks work prior. I mean, you yourself obviously were, but I think there are many people for whom the DNC leaks were the wake-up moment that perhaps for, half a generation before them were the Iraq war logs was the big wake-up moment. I'm just really mindful of the serious risks that WikiLeaks have taken. I'm thinking of Kenya. I believe 2008, there were two lawyers who were working they were involved with a WikiLeaks release that had really shaken the foundation of the Kenyan government and affected the outcome of that election. They were assassinated, those two lawyers, and they weren't the first or the last deaths, I think, associated with truth-telling in this millennium. Today, WikiLeaks, or actually the Julian Assange account, called what was happening to Julian a slow-motion assassination, because we're looking now into the 7th year of no sunlight, no fresh air. We've known for the last 2 years that from Julian's doctors, that the risk that he faces is a mortal threat. He could actually pass away as a result of his injuries. There was the lack of medical treatment for his injuries specifically, and in fact the close confinement. The Julian Assange account posted a few days ago a photo of Julian 8 years ago when he went into the embassy, and a photo of how he looks today. And the deterioration, particularly of his eyesight, his vision, it's visible. You can see it looking at the photos. You can see he looks like He's spent 25 years on the streets, not 8 years in an embassy. And that is purely what happens to somebody whose organs are unable to perform their natural functions, and who is vitamin deficient. I mean, no amount of sun lamps HA. Sorry about that. That was very interesting. The entire stream just went down, as you can tell, on all platforms. And it went down as I was describing in some detail the physical hardships and the risk of death that Julian is facing as a result of what is being done to him. I'm sure we'll have that conversation several more times in the rest of the stream. However, I just want to let HA finish off with his final thoughts before we move on to the incredible Australian journalist, Caitlin Johnston, who is here with us and who I'll be interviewing next. HA, what are your messages for Julian and for WikiLeaks and for the audience who've been here diligently watching for hours?
My message to Julian Assange is that millions of people love you, and your impact on the world is greater than I'm sure even you can ever imagine, positive impact, and that I do believe in my heart and soul that you will be victorious and that you will be free and that you will just win. I think the truth in this case, the truth doesn't always win out, but I think the truth in this case will prevail and win. And I just want to say that Julian Assange is an inspiration to everyone, adults, children, all of humanity. I think that he has done a great thing for the world, and he's part of world history. I think Julian Assange is part of world history, and I want him free. I think that we all want his freedom.
Well, thank you so much for once again taking the time. As you said, you've been involved in every vigil, and I will certainly be re-inviting you every month going forward. We are not going to quit. We are not going to stop. We are going to keep running these until we don't have to call for Julian's freedom anymore, until it is a done deal and it has happened. And thank you for being such a strong advocate and supporter of Julian and of WikiLeaks, HA.
It's an honor for me to be here, and it's just an honor for me to be the advocate. And I think that you do such a fantastic job, Suzie, and Elizabeth does such a great job, and you guys are just wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'm very privileged to call you a friend, HA.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you.
Okay.